guys, welcome back to my channel. Today for June, it's Pride Month, and I'm going to do a Pride Month recommendation video. I'm wearing all my cute little things. And yeah, Pride Month is really important to everyone realistically, because the world is just a better place with more diverse humans in it. But especially for me, last year during Pride Month, I realized after 16, 17 years of identifying as vaguely queer, bisexual, etc., being in a relationship with a woman, that I'm actually a lesbian. And that was a big revelation, and it has been really fun to become part of the lesbian community and learn all that. And part of that has been reading a lot more like sapphic and lesbian and just queer fiction in general. So I'm excited to share some of the things I've read and also do like a little Pride Month TBR of books that I want to read. So first, I'm going to start with some recommendations. Okay, so nonfiction. Recently, I listened to the audiobook of Making Love with the Land by Joshua Whitehead, who also has written fiction. I am blanking on the name of his fiction, but I believe Johnny Appleseed, something like that, was one of his, and I've wanted to read that for years, but I got on Libby, you can get a library card at the Queer Liberation Library, which I definitely recommend. I will link them in the description. I highly recommend. They have so many good like queer books that just a normal, especially if you live in a small town like I do, doesn't have. So this is basically a nonfiction memoir. It's very creative. I listened to the audiobook, which he actually reads, which was really good, especially there's a lot of Native American words in it, because I think he's technically First Nations from Canada, but yeah, that was just really nice. I love I read it in April or May. I love kind of a nature-based kind of nonfiction to get into spring, summer season, and if it's queer, that's even better. He is Two-Spirit, and I don't know if he identifies as queer, bisexual, gay, whatever, but detailed relationships with other men and Two-Spirit individuals. And I just thought it was really good, and it's always nice to hear non-white perspectives on queerness, especially like an Indigenous perspective, because I think they have such a unique perspective on it. Pre-colonization, there was so much less prejudice within Indigenous communities. So definitely recommend that, and definitely recommend in general expanding your horizons. I also read, I don't read a ton of poetry, but I read a poetry book that I really enjoyed. It was just so random. I think it was a Queer Liberation Library thing, Honeybee by Trista Matier, and it just, I believe the author is bisexual, and it just tells the story of basically a toxic homoerotic situationship relationship with her best friend, and the breakdown of that, and her dealing with the long, extended, painful breakup. And I just thought it was beautiful. I cried. I just really love a good poetry book, and it's not something that is relatable to me. Like, I've never really gone through a breakup, but when it's that well written, you can like almost feel like you're there, you know? So if you're into poetry, Honeybee. I also, I think either earlier this year or the end of last year, listened to the audiobook of Bad Gays. Bad Gays, A Homosexual History by Ben Miller and Hugh Lemmy. And that's basically, it is what the title says. It's a queer history told through stories of kind of bad people. And the point of it kind of is that queer people can, in some cases, be responsible for our own oppression, like there were literally Nazis talked about in that book, or just do messed up things that a lot of times when you hear queer stories, they're about these like magical, perfect gay people who saved the world or got legislation passed that made everything better for everybody or whatever. But there's also just a lot of people who are just doing messy, screwed up things, and especially when you go into earlier time periods, like someone being gay doesn't stop them from being racist. So I thought that was really interesting. It was just a well-researched and a well-written nonfiction historical book. It was kind of funny. The audiobook was well narrated, and yeah, so I definitely would recommend that if you're looking for something that's a slightly different perspective, not all happy little gay stories. Other not happy little gay stories, actually a lot of gay stories are very sad, but I mean that when you think of historical gay people, you tend to think of Harvey Milk and people like that instead of people doing messy things. But a very messy, painful queer book is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, which is a memoir detailing her relationship with her partner that was abusive. And I listened to the audiobook, so I know that some people either love or hate the way it's written. There's a little like choose your own adventure element of it, but I think the audiobook just reads it like in published order. I don't really know. I'd love to get a physical copy of it and see how it compares. But yeah, so it is incredibly painful, and if that is something you've been through, like if you've been in an abusive relationship, I definitely would proceed with caution. But it is very dreamlike, the metaphors are very heavy-handed, but I think for me, in a way that was done really well. It's just really beautiful and really sad, and I love her writing in general. And like bad gays, I think sometimes it's good to remember that queer people are just people. My last nonfiction is Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, which I think is kind of a must read for lesbians especially, but just anyone queer. It's a graphic novel, which I don't always love, and I didn't like fully connect with parts of it because she writes in this way that feels almost like it's meant to be like a little over intellectual, using big words for the sake of using big words to kind of show the family upbringing. I feel like they're kind of a waspy little classic all-American upper middle class family, and so there's in some ways meant to be this slight disconnect from that, but I think that it was an important story. It's mostly about like her family and mostly about her father, who before it was written had passed, and that was all really painful and made me cry. But yeah, I think it's just kind of a really important piece of the queer canon that everyone should read who's interested in reading queer books. But yeah, I didn't love it myself, and I tried to read her like comic strip, Dykes to Watch Out For, and it was okay. It's very dated. I'm a little too young to like know that much about late 80s, early 90s lesbian culture, so I felt like I was missing a little bit of it, but I would definitely like to read it at some point. Okay, then fiction. I actually have some physical books for fiction. So I'll start with the ones I don't have physical copies of. I listened to the audiobook and read it because it's on Kindle Unlimited, Meeting Millie by Claire Ashton. I literally just finished that and I really enjoyed it. It's pretty well written. It's one of those books where you're like, I feel like this could have used like one more pass through an editor, but it's just a really cute story of these two women who were best friends and stuff at Oxford, and then 10-ish years from graduation, they both end up in Oxford again, and upon like around graduating from university, they had like a big falling out, and one of them, Charlotte, is a lesbian, and the other one, Millie, like always thought she was straight, but is now starting to question if she's maybe bisexual and maybe has feelings for Charlotte and all of that. And you go into their friendship. There's some flashbacks and stuff, but I felt like the flashbacks didn't take up too much of the book, and you weren't like, what happened? Why did you guys stop being friends for like a long time? I felt like they wrapped that up pretty quickly so you could get into their friendship, and I thought it was really sweet and just cute. I'm kind of not, it's like a friends to lovers story, and I'm kind of in a brief anti-friends to lovers phase. I think I just got a little burnt out on consuming too much of it in like TV and books and everything. So I'm sure I'll be all over it soon. But yeah, it was just really fun. And yeah. And I also last year read Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, which is I don't know if it's technically a young adult book, but the people in it, the two main characters, are teenagers. So it takes place in the 50s in San Francisco. It tells the story of an Asian American teenager and just like a white teenager and their relationship, their friendship, their romance. It's butch femme dynamics, talks about lesbian bars and the police crackdown, and just the Asian American experience at that time in the 1950s was a very hard time to be gay and a very hard time to be Asian, and just thought it was really interesting and really well done. And I know Melinda Lowe has another book that I've heard good things about, so I will also be reading that at some point. It's not on my like immediate TBR. But then books I actually own, two of them because I read them and I was like, I need to own this immediately. But this is a pretty popular one. This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. I feel like this kind of blew up about a year ago, and for good reason. It is a sci-fi dystopian, all vibes, no plot. It's literally just these two characters, red and blue, writing. They started as like enemies, and then they kind of fall in love through the writing of letters, and the world building is fuzzy. The timeline is all over the place on purpose, like back and forth through time, through everything. It doesn't make if you're looking for like a plot or like a thing to make a lot of sense, but if you're very much like a no plot, just vibes, like characters, I just want a really good love story. I just want something beautiful and painful about loving someone through time and space and all of that. I definitely recommend it. I cried actually. It's like so easy to read, like the font's big and it's not that many like pages, and I honestly need to reread it because it was incredible. My favorite book of 2023, that was last year. Yeah. Our Eyes Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This tells the story of Leah and Miri, who Leah is a marine biologist. She went on this deep sea mission, and it was supposed to be like a short thing, but they got stuck under the sea for 6 months. And then Miri is her wife, who you're following her in like the present when Leah's come back and she's different. And it's another one. I love a weird book. It's another weird book. There's a bit more of a plot, but I wouldn't say you get like definitive answers on anything. It's just kind of about love and grief and loss and all of that. And I read it when I was dealing with a lot of grief in my own life, and it felt very, very comforting. So I kind of pretty quickly went out and bought it, and it's one of my absolute favorite books of all time. Yeah, it's just so beautifully written. I know she has another book that's either coming out or just came out, and I'm excited to read that. But yeah, it's just a beautiful, queer, tragic love story of sorts. And don't go into it like looking for a perfect plot, or a lot of people describe it as like sci-fi or horror, and it's like, yeah, it's a little bit of all of those things, but that's really not the point. It's just about grief and love. Another book that is mostly just about grief and love is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Ocean Vuong is also a poet who I love. Like, definitely check out his poetry. This book it technically is fiction, but I think there's definitely some stuff that's based on his actual life. So the main character is writing a letter to his mother. They are Vietnamese. Yeah, Vietnamese American, and yeah, it's mostly this letter to his mother telling their stories, his story, his life, his experience as an immigrant and being gay, and there's a lot of really heartbreaking stuff. I would definitely look at some trigger warnings because I got some shocks with some things that happen. Just really sad and beautiful, and because he's a poet, it's just so beautifully written. Yeah, I really loved it. It's so much about like trauma, but also love and loss and grief and resilience and all of those things, and family, and I really loved it. And I think there's like supposed to make a movie out of it, but I don't know. And then this other weird book, Chlorine by Jade Song, it follows I believe she's a 13-year-old girl who believes she is a mermaid, basically. Like, she believes she needs to get to the sea and be a mermaid, and will do whatever it takes to do that. And there's some body horror elements within that, but mostly it's just about girlhood and queerness and toxic masculinity. She's like on the swim team, so there's, you know, social politics within all of that. It's told like she's reflecting on her life, which I find an interesting narrative tool. Yeah, and it's so well written. It's like absolutely gorgeous, and it blew me away and made me cry. And just, yeah, it says Ren Yu is a fierce young woman who's dreamed of mermaids ever since she can remember. Yeah, it's about love and longing and the willingness to do anything to become who you truly are. And is that not the point and the message of Pride Month? Becoming who you truly are. I wouldn't do what she did, but emotionally sometimes you kind of have to, you know? Okay, and then this is gonna be a little quicker because this is my June TBR, and knowing me, I'm such a mood reader. I'll probably read like 2 of these, but 2 I'm in the middle of. One of them is Tempting Olivia, which is the sequel to Meeting Millie by Claire Ashton. So it follows like Charlotte's friend who's a lawyer and her relationship with like this woman who's getting a divorce. And as I was reading Meeting Millie and I knew that was coming, I was really excited about it because like Olivia is like kind of that ice queen bitch kind of character, and I'm a sucker for one of those. Like, they're great. So excited to read that. I'm like maybe 3% into the Kindle Unlimited thing. So then I'm also reading Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk, which it's like weirdly short. It was like a 4-hour audiobook. I'm about a little over halfway through. And it's a speculative fiction with demons and angels and a murder mystery, and it takes place in like the 1930s, and it's just sapphic and fun, and it's just like a really interesting fantasy world. I don't feel like and I didn't really know anything going into it. Like, you're just kind of told like that the main character, all you know is that she's like gonna die in so many days or whatever. So she's like a private investigator, kind of. She gets like hired by people, and like her last job might save her life is like the idea of it. So yeah, and there's like a really sweet little romance with another woman, obviously. But yeah, it's just nice. It's just fun. It's easy listening. Like, I don't know if it's young adult, but it feels kind of young adult. They're adults, so it's probably not young adult, but you know what I mean. It's just kind of like a fun little fantasy world. So I like a unique fantasy world sometimes, you know? Oh yeah, I also have the Kindle Unlimited copy of the Tea Dragon Festival, which is by Kay Flay, which is the sequel to the Tea Dragon Society, whatever. I think it's like technically a prequel. So that's just, when you want a graphic novel, it's just a cute little thing. I started reading it, and there's like deaf representation like instantly, which I love. Love all sorts of, any like disability rep in a book is exciting because there's so little. So yeah, I'm really enjoying that one. And it's nice when you're looking for a thing to like shut off your brain and just like experience joy. And these hopefully will get read, but I read gay stuff all year round. So really the priority is We Were the Universe by Kimberly King Parsons, which is probably getting a terrible glare right now. It's a library book. This, I don't really even remember what it is about. I read the first, not even chapter, like couple pages. And it's basically follows this woman who, she's a young mother, and her sister passed away recently, or at the beginning of the book, I'm not sure yet. And it kind of follows as she sort of goes off the rails, but like in a good way. I think it's kind of like a coming of age novel, but like in your 30s. And it's about sisterhood and reality. I think it's a little speculative, a little like what's real, what's a drug-induced hallucination, what's all this. And I believe the main character is like bisexual, and I don't know how much of a part of the book that is, but yeah. And I think it says she lives with her partner and her children, so I don't know if the author is with a woman or what. But. And then I have The Honeys by Ryan LaSala, which is this is definitely a YA, and it follows like, it's kind of like a thriller type of book. It follows this character Mars, who his sister dies, and then he like goes back to the summer camp that they used to go to, and Mars is trans, I believe. Him, like a trans man. So like it's about that, and they have like segregated cabins by like gender, so I'm sure that's complicated. Yeah, he's gender fluid and all that. So he goes back to this camp, and I assume tries to solve his sister's murder. I have no idea. I literally have no idea what this is about, except that everything I've read is that it's incredible and that it's very, very weird, and I love a weird book. It says something is haunting him in broad daylight, toying with his mind. If Mars can't find it soon, it will eat him alive. So that sounds great, and always love a little like trans rep. I tend to, and I think the stuff that gets more mainstream attention is just like lesbian or gay men or bisexual people or whatever. And it's always exciting to find a new book featuring trans characters and all that, especially a young adult book. Like, that's awesome. And then the final book is probably not going to get read this month. I have a really busy June because of Pride and a bunch of concerts and all sorts of stuff, but it's a classic and I had to mention it. It is on my forever TBR until I finally read it, and that is Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg. It's basically just a freaking classic. It is about butchness and lesbian identity and he/him lesbians and butch femme relationships, and I know that it's super traumatic and super dark and messed up, and people are like, I'm screwed up for days from reading this book, but I know that it is something that I need to read. I think a lot of people, maybe this is just me making this up in my head, but I feel like the way people talk about this reminds me of the way sometimes people talk about A Little Life, except that this was actually written by a butch lesbian, whereas A Little Life was not actually written by a gay man. So I know some people have some criticism of that element of it, like it's just kind of like exploiting other people's like trauma for your art, and this is like using their like own trauma for their art. Yeah, and Leslie Feinberg is a badass, and I'm excited to read stuff by them and read this and finally level up in lesbianism. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you like these recommendations and that you are going to try, if you don't already have something gay in your June TBR to stick something in there. There's a bunch of stuff on Kindle Unlimited. I have a ton of like random Kindle Unlimited sapphic books. Who knows what I'll end up reading. And yeah, definitely read queer books all year round, but the same way in different months we try and read Asian books or indigenous literature or whatever. It's definitely good to try and put a little more focus on those type of books, queer authors, queer stories, etc. during June. So thanks so much, and like, comment if you've read any of these, comment with your favorite queer books, especially if they're weird weird girl books. I love those weird girl, gays, theys, etc. books. Yeah, and I'll see you in my May wrap up, or this, yeah,